Thank you. So I was being told that this session should be very interactive. So I would like to just jump in and raise your question whenever you like. I'm Miriam. I currently work as a program manager for Microsoft Defender ATP at Microsoft. And I used to work as a Prima field engineer. This is some kind of a consultant before I switched to my current role. And this tool was created while working as a PFE. And the tool is not supported by Microsoft, so if you have any issues about it, or feature requests, or bugs, then please report to me, not to Microsoft. They won't help you. And first of all, who was already in the Hack Loop presentation? Anybody? Okay. Some people here, most of you not yet, so phew. So I just start from the beginning. When I worked as a PFE with customers, I did a lot of security assessments. So I just came in to the customer, we configured the tool, collected some data, I worked on the reports, and had the presentation in the end. So I told the customer what is good in the environment, what is not. And most of the time, there is one big issue, and what could that be? Say it loud. The logs, yes, that goes into the right direction. Most of the time, customers had no auditing at all, so they could not see what happens in their environment. And this is very bad, because when the customer tries to attack your organization, your environment, he or she has all the time in the world that the attacker wants to get information about your environment, about your employees, who's clicking on links, who opens attachments, who's the administrator, who's the CEO. And once the attacker is prepared, then, well, the attack does not take more than 24 to 48 hours until the attacker has hold of your entire environment. So, enterprise administrator. And if the attacker is enterprise administrator, well, what can the attacker do? Come on, people. I know it's early. Exactly. Everything. And most of the companies, they don't detect at all that there is something fishy going on in their environment. And if they are, most of the time, it's already after 200 days something. And therefore, there was a time when companies said, okay, yes, we do. Of course, we do have a hardware firewall. We do have an antivirus scanner. Of course, we are safe. Yeah, why shouldn't we? But times have changed. Maybe this was 10 years ago. True, but not anymore, because also the attackers have noticed that it is not that easy to breach a hardware firewall anymore unless it does not have a backdoor or something configured. So normally they go after the easiest link, which is most of the time the user, right? And the attacker sends a phishing mail or sends somehow an URL and grabs the identities. And when he has one identity, he uses this identity to identify as the user and to grab even more and more identities and to lateral move in the environment. Grabbing even more identities until the attacker has full control of the whole environment. Yay! And to protect organizations from identity theft, Microsoft has deployed, or not deployed, but has this Microsoft security compliance toolkit, which recommend to harden the systems. So there are a lot of recommendations in there. You can download it if you search for Microsoft Security Compliance Toolkit. And in this toolkit, you can find several baselines. You can find the policy analyzer and also other tools. And the baselines, those are some kind of GPOs, which you can implement in your environment, but be careful, do not just implement them and walk away, because it is really, 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 really important to test if everything still works, because it hardens your systems. And if you did not test it, I wouldn't say that your system works anymore, so be careful. But this is the recommendation how it should look like, at least. And in those baselines, there are not only hardening settings, there are also audit policies included. And an audit policy is a recommendation what you should monitor, because there are those advanced audit event logs, and those event logs you can configure. And if you configure them, you can see even more events in your environment. So if you configure them and you get even more events, that is awesome, isn't it? Yes. Well, it is horrible to read through every event. Because can somebody of you tell me at least one event ID that you remember of, and not those? Yes, please. Very good. So you worked with those before. Very good. Anybody else? Yes, and it's very hard to really tell them. And can you explain what those event IDs mean?
Yes, I do. 4688 is process execution, so if you work in incident response, that's mandatory to know. 4624 is login. I think 46, successful. 4625 is failed login. 4648 as well for lateral movement. It tells you when you log in on a remote systems.
And those are the most important events. Those are the most important events to spot lateral movement. I know, or I see you have worked with that before. What do you do?
We try to list them all during an incident to try to find all potentially infected or where the attacker could have been during the incident.
Nice. So I tried that too. So I also remember those event IDs. And this is also when I started to work on this tool. Because I had this customer, and this customer told me, okay, we want to implement the security baselines, but we have no idea what events will be generated. Which events are being generated and which events are being important. And I was helping the customer to build their SOC environment. And so the customer asked me, is there actually a document which you can use to find out which events are being generated when you apply a certain baseline? And I was like, well, we have this document and it has 754 pages. And the customer was like, are you kidding me? So the customer asked, do we have really an overview of all the events that are being generated? And I was like, well, no, we don't have that. And so the customer asked me to write down all the events that are being generated if he applied this particular baseline. And I was like, yes, I'm super excited. I can do. And so I sat down, started to write down the events. And somehow, while I was writing down the events for this particular baseline, the customer showed up at my desk and told me, oh, and while you're at it, please also write down the events of this baseline, of this baseline, of this baseline, and you have so many baselines at Microsoft. Can you just write down for every baseline? And I was like, no way. There's no time in the world for doing that. And so I thought, how can I solve this problem? And came up with the idea of automating it. And this was the time when the first version of EventList was born. So as I started to write down those events in an Excel file, I created an Excel file with several macros, and you could import a baseline. That's here. You could import the Microsoft baselines. When you imported them, they showed up here in the drop-down. And then you could generate an event list for the baseline where you find all the IDs, all the event IDs, all the information, all the documentation for the events, which will be generated if you apply this particular baseline. And the customer was happy. I moved on to the next customer. And the next customer was pretty excited about my tool. And then they asked me, well, have you heard about MITRE ATT&CK? MITRE ATT&CK is pretty awesome if you want to detect in the environment. And MITRE ATT&CK, who of you knows MITRE ATT&CK? Okay, I think there's more than on Tuesday. So MITRE ATT&CK is a framework that helps you to understand the way that an attacker takes in your environment. So all the areas, you have several areas here. So it's the initial access, for example, execution, persistence, privilege escalation, and so on. So you have several categories which are called areas, and to these areas you have several techniques mapped, and it is some kind of a recommendation of what can happen and how can you protect yourself. And when you look at this little MITRE ATT&CK flower, it looks like a flower, it is very beautiful, but actually it's all about MITRE ATT&CK. And this graphic displays the MITRE ATT&CK techniques mapped to data source. And when we only look at the data source of MITRE ATT&CK compared to EventList, we are only here. So that means we are only looking into the Windows event logs at this time. And so the customer wanted me to implement MITRE ATT&CK in the first place. And they also had other problems while building their SOCs. So what problems come up when you build a SOC? Who of you built a SOC, or who of you was working in a SOC? Okay. So what problems did you have? Too many events? Too many events? So first, my first customer had the problem. They did not know which events are being generated if you apply a particular baseline. Next step is too many events. Maybe you are not in the fortunate position to have all the storage capacity in the world. And maybe you use, okay, I don't drop names, but maybe you have only a limited SIEM system so that you cannot forward all the event IDs that you would like to. And so you need to filter. So, next step, which events are important? And which events do you want to forward? And last but not least, if you have all these events, what's the next step? Searching, exactly. Some people say, okay, now we have the events, so we are keeping them for forensic purposes. So if we are getting breached, then we can look it up. Well, honestly, that doesn't happen, because if you aren't used to work with those events, then you have no idea what's going on if you are getting breached. And so therefore, you should really hunt proactively in your environment. And those were the issues that my customers had when working with them. And I tried to address them with the tool EventList. So EventList is based on PowerShell. You can install it, you can find it on GitHub, and on GitHub there is also a documentation on how you can install it. You can install it with install module. And, well, I still need to work on my naming conventions. So at this moment you open EventList with OpenGUI. That will be changed someday. And if you open it, this is the interface that shows up when you open EventList. And you still have the functionality to import baselines. And I already imported some. So you can choose which baseline you want to select. And then if you select the baseline, you just immediately see which MITRE attack techniques and areas are being covered by that baseline. Of course, you can also delete a baseline, which I just do because I forgot to clean up after my last presentation. I delete the selected baseline, and if you don't trust the imported baselines, you can also just delete all the baselines and import your own baselines. So, if you want to generate an event list, this functionality is still given, and here you have several options. So you can generate baseline events only. So this is still the same as in the old Excel sheet. You still have the event ID. You see which option configures it. You see what happens. You even have a documentation link. And you have also the recommendation if you should monitor it or if it's just an event that maybe is important for performance analysis or something else, maybe something nice to know but not for your security. Then you also have the option to export it as a CSV. I prepared already a CSV link so that I don't need to generate it over and over again. And this is what it looks like. So it's just a plain CSV, which you can use to import in other Excel sheets or in other programs or however you want to process it. And you can also say, okay, I want to see which events are being covered if I mark several MITRE attack techniques. If you do so, you say, okay, I want this on a MITRE attack base. And you see the technique ID. You see the technique name, you see the event ID and the event name. And yes, I have to admit, not every information is filled yet for the event IDs. So if you would like to contribute, please go ahead. There are a lot of events that still should be filled out, but there are also a lot of events that are already included in the database. But nevertheless, you have the event ID to look it up yourself. Okay, so first problem, what event IDs are being generated if you apply a particular baseline? Check. Next problem, which events are important to forward? And for this particular reason, I have the generate agent config. So you select the MITRE ATT&CK techniques that are important for you. Or you can just select the baseline and your boxes are being filled. And you can just select the SIEM option of your choice. At this moment, there are only Splunk Universal Forwarder, for example. You get a snippet of Splunk, and you can just copy and paste it to your configuration and deploy it on your clients. Well, for Microsoft Defender, I just implemented an Easter egg. I'm sorry. You don't need events at this particular moment for Microsoft Defender ATP because it works with streams. But I also included ArcSight or other XPath-based systems, so you can just copy and paste it into your configuration. You don't need to do all the work yourself to write event ID equal 46 to whatever, 24. And, of course, you can also generate a GPO. If you say, okay, I want to cover particular MITRE ATT&CK areas, then you can click on the Generate GPO, choose a folder, where to store it, and ta-da! This is our very own GPO for this use case, which relies on advanced audit queries or advanced audit configuration. And you see here in the machine, Microsoft, Windows NT audit, you have the path that configures your advanced audit configuration. So at this moment, Sysmon is not included yet, but I plan to include it in the future. So at this time, you can only generate a GPO for advanced audit policies. And if you have a GPO as an input and you generate a GPO out of it, it's not the same GPO that falls out because I have concentrated this tool only on security events. So only the security events that I have chosen in the database will be used for the GPO output. Okay, last but not least, what's the last question that we have? Hunting. Exactly, hunting. And for the hunting part, I rely on a tool which is called Sigma. Okay, there is at this moment is not another. Oh, there is. Actually, at this moment, there is at the MITRE ATT&CK workshop. Somehow, Thomas and my session are just being scheduled parallelly. I really would love to see his session, but well, unfortunately, I cannot drop the mic and go to the session. But at this moment, there's also a session from Thomas Patzke at the MITRE ATT&CK workshop about Sigma. And Sigma was created by Florian Roth, and Thomas Patzke is one of the main contributors, and I think he's also one of the co-founders. I'm not sure. But Sigma is an awesome project which has one generic language, which is called YAML. And if you configure a configuration in YAML format, you can just pipe it to the Sigma converter and you can generate a query for the SIEM system of your choice. And at this moment, there is, for example, Splunk is supported, Microsoft Defender ATP is also supported, and I'm very proud that I worked with John Tuckner on the Azure Log Analytics support. So also shout out to John. Great work. And this is the base for the hunting query generation. And so if you choose particular areas or techniques here in EventList, and you click on Generate Queries, then you can choose a SIEM solution of your choice. But that's not all. You can, because I have several options in here with the Generate Queries. For the Generate Sigma Queries, you have two options. If you have nothing configured so far in EventList, then you just get the queries that you can just copy and paste into Sigma to generate your queries. But if you have Sigma installed on your client, there is this option, Configure EventList, and you can configure the Sigma path. And you configure the path where Sigma C is located in. So this is in the Git repository in the tools folder. You click OK, and you see here Sigma C. And if you have this option configured and you click on Generate Queries, then you can immediately convert the queries into the SIEM language of your choice. Well, Microsoft Defender is not a SIEM, but you can use it to hunt. And this takes a very long time at this moment because my tool is written in PowerShell. Sigma is written in Python. And so that's why I have prepared some queries. So if you have Sigma installed and configured in EventList, this is the output that you would get. So you have a folder and you have 3 files in it and a folder. In the folder YAML, you see all the YAML configurations, the plain YAML files. In the queries, you see that it is configured in Markdown, so you can just copy and paste it to the documentation system of your choice. And you also have the query already translated to the language of your choice. And if you don't want to have all those headlines and the information about the author or description, then you can just go in the folder and open the EventList queries txt. Because in this document, it's just piped to this document the commands that you need to configure it. And so you can just copy it and paste it into your solution. And we also have a log file in here because Sigma does not support everything yet. Maybe based on the SIEM system, maybe based on other things that maybe there needs to be some work done in the back end. Please, if you want to, also support Sigma. And if you like it, you can improve it. And Pablo? Oh, sorry. And if some rule fails to create a Sigma rule, you will find it here in the log. And if you want this rule to be implemented, you can go ahead or ask the developer of your choice to implement it, or maybe find another solution. So if we do the same thing for Splunk, you see you have here also the query for Splunk. You can do this with every language of your choice. And same format here with txt and also with the log. Okay, so the query is not finished yet, or the generate query step is not finished yet. Now it's finished, because there's also this option, generate queries in YAML format. If you select this option, then you get this output. So you just have the YAML folder, you have just the plain information in the markdown file to copy and paste it to your documentation system of your choice. You also have the log file, and most of the time everything goes good. And you have the YAML folder again. And if you don't configure EventList, if you don't configure the Sigma path and generate the queries, then you just get the command, which you can pipe into your Sigma backend to generate the queries there. Because maybe out of some reasons you don't want to have Sigma installed on your machine, or you don't want to have Python installed something. And this is what you can do if you have Sigma running in the backend. And basically that is EventList. So I'm still looking for people who would like to contribute. So if you say, okay, EventList is a cool thing, I have ideas, I want to help with this project, please go ahead, contact me. I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on GitHub. I think the best way to reach out to me is on Twitter. If you have some ideas and already worked on something, then just send me a pull request. I will review it, and please make sure that it runs through several security checks. And I would love you to participate on EventList, to contribute to, and tell me what you think. Tell me what ideas you have. That is EventList. Thank you very much. And if you have some questions, I'm here to answer them. Thank you.
So do we have some questions? Nope. Okay, so I have one. Yes. So first, I think it's a very cool tool. Thank you very much for this. That's going to help me a lot. And I was wondering, how did you do the mapping between the event themselves and the attack matrix techniques? Because, was it manual?
Yes.
Okay.
Next question normally is, how long did you take?
Yes.
It took me a long time. I think it was something about half a year to a year until I did all the mapping. I used a lot of my spare time.
Okay, thank you very much for this. Any other questions?
Otherwise, I'll be also at the MITRE ATT&CK workshop today at 2 p.m. If you can't get enough of EventList, which I'm totally convinced of, come visit my session, 2 p.m. MITRE ATT&CK workshop. Thank you.
Thank you.